So what we need to think about really is the total ecosystem that exists now in search, and actually trying to get in front of our target audience at each different stage of the buying journey. And that can be both linear and it can be extremely messy, right? So people can bounce around all sorts of different search platforms. So really the concept that we like to speak about today is really that search is everywhere. And instead of performing search engine optimization, we should think about performing search everywhere optimization. And essentially, wherever your potential target audience is searching, ultimately you want to get found in those places so that you can influence the buying journey, which isn't single search. It's definitely multiple touch points, and we want to be showing up in as many of those places as possible.
So hi guys, this is Ayman and welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Feed by Social Champ. And today we have James with us, who is the founder and CEO of SEO Sherpa. And today we have a very interesting topic to talk about. That is why SEO is no longer just for websites, and now it's becoming increasingly important for social search as well. So all over to you, James. Why do you think that SEO is now moving towards social search as well?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing really in present times is that there's a real diversification of how users are searching online. Historically, obviously, we had a single go-to platform. Most people relied on Google for all of their, search needs. But now we're finding that there's a real spread of platform usage, everything from AI and ChatGPT, Perplexity, traditional search engines, and of course, social search platforms really taking precedence for different search queries. So there's a real rise in search habits across platforms like Instagram and TikTok particularly, but equally in other vertically focused social search engines like LinkedIn and YouTube. Lots of search behavior happening there. So we really need now to think about SEO, search engine optimization, as optimizing for search engines, because that's exactly what it is, not just optimizing for Google.
So how do you actually think all of these social platforms, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, are now having search as well? Because before they were just considered as social media platforms, and no one ever talked about search first platforms. But now people are saying that these are search first platforms, and people are actually going towards optimizing their content on social media platforms. So what are the strategies you think that are people using?
Yeah. Well, if you think about, user behavior, people would go to certain, vertical search engines for different search needs, right? So, we find that very commonly social search platforms are used for content discovery that then could trigger searches across your more traditional or bottom of funnel search platforms, right? So someone might find about a trending topic on Instagram and TikTok, understand what product is behind that or what brand is behind that, and then they would then transition onto perhaps Google or even Amazon, for example, to get more towards a product or commercially led sort of search query thereafter. So what we need to think about really is the total ecosystem that exists now in search, and actually trying to get in front of our target audience at each different stage of the buying journey. And that can be both linear and it can be extremely messy, right? So people can bounce around all sorts of different search platforms. So really the concept that we like to speak about today is really that search is everywhere. And instead of performing search engine optimization, we should think about performing search everywhere optimization. And essentially, wherever your potential target audience is searching, ultimately you want to get found in those places so that you can influence the buying journey, which isn't single search. It's definitely multiple touch points, and we want to be showing up in as many of those places as possible. So ultimately we can influence the search habits and ultimately drive commercial value through to our websites and conversion platforms.
That's great. So, do you think the job of SEO executives have now increased? Because before they're only focusing on search engines, but now they're also focusing on social media platforms. So, do you think their job has increased, or because of the use of AI, it has actually been much more easier to do so?
Well, I definitely think the breadth of channels that we need to be thinking about as SEOs has definitely expanded. For as long as I can really remember, SEO was just really another word for Google, albeit that we've always been using the term search engine optimization, but because Google was the dominant platform, it's really all SEOs cared about for a long period of time. But now that shift is happening and we're seeing this diversification, really as SEOs, we need to sort of, broaden our sort of view now and think about all of these different places that search happens. So definitely the breadth of platforms has changed. Can AI assist and help? Well, I think AI, can certainly assist almost anyone in any job function if used correctly, to improve their efficiency, get tasks done better, work with data sets that's more difficult as a human, that AI can perform better. So there's definitely use cases, but I think really the shift that's happening within the SEO space is really a movement away from just like optimizing platforms and now really thinking about holistic marketing activity. And as I said, really being shown and being seen in multiple places, which extends far beyond just, a search engine, let's say.
That's right. So for Google, we usually have Eat, but for what do we have basically for social media platforms? Do we also have Eat for social media platforms, or is there any other term that's being used now?
Yeah, so all platforms have some degree of measuring, content quality and authority. The way that that is described might be different in different places, but equally, we should also be thinking about our content on social media and specifically for social media search to demonstrate those same things that Google would be looking to reward, from a traditional, search engine standpoint. So if we can get across our authority and our expertise, our subject matter expertise in respect of the content that we talk about, that's really going to help. So some sort of ways you can think about that for your social media content is demonstrating your expertise and your authority in the first few seconds of your content, right? So you might say, well, like my example, I might say something like, well, I've been doing SEO for 15 years and work with these clients. Here are some tips on how to X, Y, and Z. And what that's going to do is, of course, demonstrate my expertise to the person that's viewing that video, but quite typically it's also going to get people to stick around for longer, and your dwell time on the videos, your watch time on your social media content will also improve because the person watching that video will know that the information that's being shared is shared from the point of view of an expert and not just the general public. So whilst the whilst the sort of terms may be different, I think the general direction of demonstrating expertise and authority should transfer through all of your marketing, not just specifically your SEO.
That's right. So for Google, and when you're writing blogs and all of that, so we have this whole ranking metrics. So do we have that for social media platforms as well? Can we rank on social media platforms, or are there any other metrics that we use?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, there's a ranking and ordering system that exists on social platforms. And again, those metrics might be different, but typically they're trying to rank and order based upon some of the same fundamental, characteristics and criteria, right? So, typically on social platforms, the engagement of your content is going to be a big factor, right? The watch time, the number of watches, those sorts of things, and of course, the relevancy to the search query itself. So whilst you create engaging videos, which I think should be standard practice, or should I say engaging content should be standard practice for all of your social media, you also want to think about actually how do I now position that content as being relevant to the searches that someone might perform in order to find it. And that really is like on page SEO for social media. So if you've got a particular search term that you want to target, then what you would look to do is include that in all of the right places that these social algorithms evaluate and assess for. So you'd want to include your target keyword term in the title of the video. You'd want to include it in your captions and description. You'd also want to include that in the words that you speak so that it's very obvious straight away to those social algorithms that this piece of content could match the query that someone is performing, and therefore let's test it, let's show it to some people and see if it actually answers those search queries. And then once they've rolled it out to a subset of people, your engagement metrics, your watch time, your dwell time, your watch past 3 seconds, and all of those other things that your audience would be familiar with, then become increasingly important as a measure of the quality of that content. And when you've got the relevancy component and the quality working in unison, that's when you're going to start to rank that content really well within those search platforms.
That's right. So right now you just talked about keyword research and search queries. So do we find our keywords and our search queries the same way that we found for Google and for Bing and all of that, or is there another way?
Yeah, so there's tools that you can use to discover these terms, and it's really interesting to actually, pop in your kind of business keywords and actually see what the distribution of searches looks across all platforms. This is a real key part of how we approach our search everywhere optimization strategy. Is first of all find out really where is your market hanging out, and which platform should I be spending my time on to influence the search and buying behavior of my target audience. So there is a few different tools. The one that we really like to use is called keywordtool.io, and that will show you how that search spread looks across all of the primary platforms, from your traditional search engines like Google, Yahoo, and Bing, to even AI engines. I think they have Perplexity in there now. And then across your social platforms, certainly they have data for Instagram, TikTok, and they have data for YouTube as well. So you can see there where there is search volume. You can see which search queries are trending across different platforms. And then, of course, once you've done that and you understand what people are searching in which places, then you can go about, creating content to get in front of those searches wherever they happen.
That's great. So right now you also talked about Perplexity. So how do you actually rank on LLMs? And do you think that just because you said that there's search everywhere now, so do you think social media platforms play a key role in getting your business ranked on LLMs as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I mean, a lot of the sort of core fundamentals of SEO, they do transfer through into the um, LLM ecosystem as well. But there are some key kind of differences between a traditional Google search algorithm and what it's measuring, and then typically what the LLMs do. So all LLMs will rely on a key set of data, and really all of them now are using some crawl of the internet for that evaluation. And ChatGPT, for example, is heavily relying on Yahoo data and increasingly now on Google data. So in order for you to be considered, you actually already need to rank well within SEO. You need to be present on the web. You need to be indexable. All of those things need to happen in order for you to be considered within the LLMs. But then, really, what is the primary driver, I would say, within LLM rankings, or let's say visibility right now, is your kind of mention frequency. So what sites you're mentioned on, with what frequency, and within what context. And the way that I describe this is in the context of co-mentions, and essentially getting your brand name mentioned in conjunction with the terms that you would want to show up for, right? So in our case, SEO Sherpa would want to be frequently mentioned in the context of SEO agency, or best SEO agency, or content marketing agency, and so on and so forth. And when the LLMs can see those associations happening with great frequency and on websites that they trust and within data sets that they trust, then the chances of you showing up within the LLMs will increase frequently. So this does extend across social media. One thing that you really want to make sure that you've got consistent as far as social is concerned is definitely make sure that your business information is consistent across all of those platforms. So the same sort of byline that you use on your website should be consistent with how you term yourself on Instagram, on TikTok, and so on and so forth. That would be really foundational. But equally, what you're now starting to see is a lot of these platforms are surfacing social content within those AI models. So Google is doing this a lot more these days. And if you go and have a look at some of the AI overviews, a lot of those results will include short form video content now. You'll see TikToks showing up a lot there. You quite clearly see Google assets like YouTube Shorts showing up there. So again, if you could be addressing those, common questions, those types of queries that users would be performing in those models, then it's also very likely that you can get your actual social content being displayed there as well, especially because the LLMs do place a lot of weight on the recency of content. So freshness is a really, really strong factor for a majority of those platforms. So if you're regularly producing social media content and it's relevant to the queries that are happening right now, then you can find that content is surfacing quite nicely.
That's great. So right now you talked about short form videos. And when we talk about SEO and writing blogs, so there was always this concept that the more blogs you write, the more chances you are going to have to rank on Google. But that was obviously before the era of AI. Now when you're talking about short form videos, do you think that frequency and the number of videos that you're creating is also very important for social search?
I mean, it depends on, whether those videos, of course, answer a query that users are commonly performing. Um, so I mean, I think generally a good rule of thumb is less but better. So making all of that content like high quality and, in the context of search, making sure that it's answering queries and it's doing that to the best of your ability and hopefully better than everyone else in your market. And then it should perform better. But clearly, if you can do less and better, then sorry, if you can do better and more, then that's even better than doing less but better, right? So, that will come down to your ability to execute high quality content at scale. I would definitely not recommend just producing for producing sake. Definitely wouldn't get into the realms of just creating a whole bunch of AI slop to try and surface yourself in AI. Might work in the short term, but I don't think it's a good long-term strategy, and it's certainly not a good long-term brand strategy, which we should all care about, not just visibility.
So, when you're talking about LLMs, you also talked about brand mentions. And online, a lot of people are talking about Reddit and the importance of, having brand mentions on Reddit to get ranked on LLMs. So, do you also believe that is Reddit now becoming more and more important after AI?
Um, Platforms are ever changing. So there was a heavy dominance of Reddit, particularly on Google's AI overviews, and ChatGPT. But we've seen a really huge slash in the citations for Reddit in the matter of the last weeks. So I think um, community platforms can obviously be very valuable, but I wouldn't really worry too much about sort of focusing on specific platforms because honestly, they can change overnight. We saw it with Quora. Quora, were heavily cited in Google search. We're now seeing it with Reddit. Like the platforms will change. I think what you want to really have at the core is a premise of what are we looking to achieve, and that is, of course, really strong brand sentiment. Good conversations happening around your brand and your products in any place where that search may happen rather than trying to exploit particular platforms because otherwise then you'll build your whole castle on one platform and then overnight the algorithms or the platforms themselves will decide that something else is important and your traffic will be wiped out. So it's better to just be a little bit more holistic, a little bit more long-term thinking, and make sure that you're diversifying well and being in all of the right places.
That's amazing. So, what misconception do you actually see marketers making when it comes to social media, especially and SEO as well?
Misconceptions. Well, I mean, in SEO, there's loads, but I hope that the market to some extent is maturing somewhat these days, where a lot of the misconceptions that were there in the past are slowly diluting themselves because hopefully there are good practitioners out there that are educating. So, I mean, in SEO, I think keywords still being like the primary, factor or the primary thing of importance. I mean, yes, people type in keyword terms or search queries into Google, but document matching those keywords and having them specifically mentioned in that exact word order in the document of your page being important, and having it in meta tags and those sorts of things, that's really old school SEO. But I think that opinion probably still exists, and still honestly exists with some practitioners, which is kind of alarming. What would be a misconception for social media that I come up against? It's a good question. I would say I probably don't operate in the social media space enough to probably get those questions coming to me. To be honest, I'll probably avoid answering that one, because I think if I was to, I would be doing it on hearsay rather than actual, like, maybe direct.
Let's rephrase it. I'll rephrase. I'm talking about the misconceptions that people have for SEO in social media.
Oh, SEO in social media. Okay, cool. Well, that's yeah, maybe I can answer that one a little bit better. So I think um there's still probably quite a strong misconception that social media engagement signals directly impact web ranking performance. Um, a lot of people, would sort of cite correlation studies in the past where they would see a piece of content, let's say, a blog post being, frequently liked or shared across social media platforms, and then citing that as one of the reasons why that piece of content would rank well within Google search. Whereas that really is just a correlation. A good piece of content that people are engaging with should ultimately rank well within Google search. But what Google and other search engine platforms are typically measuring aren't the social media signals. Why? Because most of what happens on social media is obfuscated from the search platforms. They can't see a complete set of signals, therefore they can't use them confidently as a measure of whether that content is good or not. So I think that's probably a main one. What we are starting to see, though, of course, now is much more indexing of social media content in Google search. So I think definitely, if I was to perhaps um, maybe sort of pose a different answer, is that social media is becoming much more important to the overall search ecosystem, which definitely wasn't the case, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, for example. As we said, there's more search happening natively within social media platforms. That's one thing. And also, secondly, we're seeing a lot more social media content actually being indexed and displayed within traditional search. So whether that is TikTok very frequently, YouTube obviously, but equally we're starting to see now LinkedIn posts coming up and performing well in traditional search as well. So I think just a complete, again, holistic approach. Use all platforms, post where's most appropriate to your audience, and then the good content will ultimately surface back in traditional search as well.
That's amazing advice. So I also have this question that a lot of marketeers, they have this debate that SEO content can be quite boring and corporate type, and they want to show their creativity on social media. So do you also think the same, or can there actually be a balance between SEO friendly content and creativity when it comes to social media platforms, especially?
Yeah, I think creativity always has a play. To be honest, I think people. I think probably it's a case of many people sort of misconstruing or misattributing relevancy for being boring. You could be relevant and interesting. Like, it is actually possible. Just because you want to answer someone's question, you can do that in a different and unique way. And ultimately, the only way to really perform well in search is to be different. Because if you've just produced the same content that already exists in search, whether that's traditional search or social media search, all you're going to be is a second grade copy of what's already there. And that is not what the platforms want to reward, right? They want to reward stuff that answers users' queries, but it's done in a matter that's unique and different, and therefore you are worthy of surfacing at the top, and not just be hidden amongst all of the mix of all the generic stuff that already exists. So you want to be matching the angle that people, sorry, matching the format that people want, right? So sometimes they're going to want a text post, sometimes they're going to want a video. Like those things pretty much hold true. But if you can match the format but do it with a unique approach, that's the perfect way to actually go about it. So look for what doesn't change, but then also come in with your own perspective and unique way of handling that topic, and that's ultimately how you'll perform best.
That's great. So, how do you actually see the future of SEO? Do you see us more following human behavior, or do you see us following technical SEO more?
Can I say both? Because both are really important, right? There's a lot of people will post content um on LinkedIn, LinkedIn SEO or Twitter SEO communities. People will say, don't write or don't create for search engines, create for humans. No, you need to do both. Like your content needs to be crawlable and indexable and discoverable. You need to make the job of search robots easy, but then ultimately you want to serve the human. So both aspects honestly are equally important. If you can't have success without both of them in operation, you need to have both things in play. So, yep. Again, it's holistic. You need to be covering, I guess, all angles then.
So, how do you actually see the future of SEO? In the next 3 and 5 years, because you see that SEO is now changing rapidly after AI, LLMs, and all of that. So, where do you see the future of SEO?
Yeah, and I mean, I see it to be an evolution of the direction that we're moving towards. So I think again, we're going to see more diversification of platforms. I think you're going to see a lot more zero-click search, which means probably a decreasing amount of website traffic, which we're already experiencing. And you're going to see a greater adoption of AI platforms where people can get much more personalized, responses to the queries that they perform that are based upon their, unique sort of prompt history, their own personal preferences and tastes, which of course, these platforms will continue to build up over time. So I think more personalized and much more like diversified. That would be like the general direction that I would say that we're heading towards. And like I said, from a practitioner's standpoint, we're gonna really be broadening our horizons and our descriptions of what our role currently is, and I think that's a good thing for the industry. We tend to be very siloed. We tend to be labeled just with this sort of idea of being optimizers, and I think now we really need to bring birth to really sort of creative, holistic, broad topic marketers to ultimately do well in all search ecosystems.
That's interesting. So, this brings us at the end of the podcast, James. It was wonderful having you. At the end, would you like to give any advice to all of those SEO people out there who's actually doing SEO for social media, especially?
Yeah, I would just say, test a lot. Like it's, the best results come from actually being in the trenches and executing. So, momentum really fuels growth and improvement within your space. So, don't just sort of sit on information, don't just be a consumer. Get out there and create and trial and test. And I think as the more that you do, the more feedback that you get and the quicker that you can kind of learn and adapt. So yeah, just get out there and do it, and hopefully it will point you in the right direction.
That's amazing advice. Thank you for being here. It was lovely having you.
Thank you, appreciate it.